So let's go ahead and get started. Let's first talk about the agenda, some of the items that we're going to talk about today. We're pretty excited about this new offering. It is officially out and available. It's out of beta. You can go and test it and download it and start playing with it, the full version. So we're pretty pumped up about that, and also the SharePoint and Office offerings along with projects. So a lot of new stuff coming down the wire. You guys probably have heard about it. That's probably part of the reason why these webinars we're definitely getting a lot more traction from them because of the level of interest. Just a little bit around the GoToWebinar environment. If you haven't attended a webinar before with this, there's a Q&A area. Feel free to drop some questions in there. We did a TFS and Project Server 2010, and we got literally multiple questions on that particular session. So we always encourage you to come in with questions that you have or anything that pops up during the webinar that you want to get answered. Okay, so what we want to go through in the hour that we have available to us is let's talk a little bit about the improvement areas in Project 2010. We also want to talk about some of the changes that were made. This is a pretty significant upgrade. That's we say that every time that there's an upgrade, whether it was from 2000 in the work group environment over into 2003 and then to 2007. But here we're seeing some pretty significant changes. We're really seeing a maturity both with Project and SharePoint, and we're seeing the client really also making some major modifications there as well. So we want to talk through that. Then we want to move into this whole notion of unification with project and portfolio management. Project is finally, from my perspective at least, maturing into a full-blown project and portfolio management offering. And not to say that there's a number of different things you couldn't do with 2007, but it did have some gaps. It had some areas that definitely could have been improved upon, particularly around the portfolio piece. And I think they've answered a lot of those questions here with 2010. Then we want to talk about some of those new things and get right into them, like demand management. Right. We also want to look at some of the portfolio analytics that we get now with 2010. We want to talk a little bit about what's happening on the client side with this whole notion of enhanced project management, both on the client and on the server side, some of the things that you can do there. And then we'll talk a little bit about the time and task entry, basically from an end user's perspective, from a team member's perspective. What are the differences that they're going to be seeing while they're working in their environment? And then we'll basically start wrapping it up with some questions and then go into next steps. So as I talk about these different topics, I'm also going to go into and show you a demo in the system itself so you can really get a sense of it. We have another webinar that's called Getting Started with Project 2010 that's going to be more in alignment with getting it installed, getting users in the system, doing some basic configuration settings and working with it that way. This is for the most part a very high level, what's new and what's different than what we've seen in previous versions of Project and Project Server. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the improvement areas. So when Microsoft makes one of these big releases, we typically see an associated graphic, or in this case a donut, that is showing us all the different areas in which they've made their investment. The first part up in the upper left-hand corner is definitely a new user interface from the client perspective, from the Microsoft Project perspective. This is, as I've been saying to students and our customers, that this is the most significant update that they've made to Project Professional and Standard on the desktop since version 1.0. So it is using the ribbon now, which looks and feels a lot like the rest of Office, which is definitely a nice part of being able to work with this solution, is that you see a lot of commonality there. And also we're seeing more of a web-based ability to edit, which is nice. So you can allow for basically lightweight project managers or part-time project managers to be able to go into, from a web-based perspective, into projects and make some simple edits, like creating new tasks, creating some dependencies, maybe building some team members and those types of things. A lot more than you were able to do in 07. The other part to this is the full integration with SharePoint 2010. So now when you deploy Project Server 2010, one of the requirements is to have SharePoint in place. Obviously, that's going to increase the amount of investment you're probably going to be making at the beginning, with the fact that you do have to make some hardware and software investments just to get this thing up and running because of SharePoint, but you're also obviously going to get all the residual benefits of working with SharePoint, all the additional functionality that comes with SharePoint Server as opposed to SharePoint Services. And we have some upcoming SharePoint webinars as well. I encourage you to take a look at those, but that's as far as I'll go with that. There's also some workgroup collaboration components to this, where if you're not using Project Server, you can basically be working with Microsoft Project on the desktop and publish to a SharePoint site and allow for your team members to manage their tasks that way. So you don't get all of the reporting and all the workflow functionality that you get in Project Server when you do that, but it's a good way, it is a very efficient way for you to basically be able to communicate with your team, right out of the box. And then, of course, this enhanced time management, right, for dealing with project time and non-project time from a time capturing perspective. Okay, and probably the most significant area, that, at least from my perspective, around this new release is this whole notion of unified project and portfolio management, where now we're getting a full portfolio management environment by which we can look at projects that are currently in the system and be able to weigh them against upcoming projects that are being proposed, right? Projects that are in flight, projects that are aligned with strategic objectives of the organization, be able to use business drivers when proposals are being created and those types of things. That's all around portfolio management. Well, I need to be able to analyze what I currently have in place and be able to weigh them and do some different analytics against the projects and force projects in, force them out, and do those types of things. So it's not just all these different projects that happen to be in the system, right, which I really feel is what's going on with 2007. Our big push when we implement something like 07 is we're in there basically telling organizations, listen, move to an environment by which you can centrally manage projects and resources. That's your number one objective. With 2010, we're going to be able to take that conversation a little bit further and allow them to say, let's look at what projects you should be working on. Right? Are these the right projects to be moving forward? It's not just about storage and centralization. It's now a question of whether I should be doing something. Okay? So we'll get into that. I've got another slide on that as well. From a technological perspective, we've got full integration with Exchange and TFS. Very nice. And like I said, we have this TFS webinar that we've been doing to basically illustrate that. There's a lot of excitement around that area. Excuse me. We've got full 64-bit compatibility, so everything is going to have to run on 64-bit. Obviously, there will be some performance enhancements there. And we have no longer any more ActiveX dependencies, so that's huge. A lot of the support tickets and different troubleshooting that we would do, a lot of that had to do around ActiveX issues where it wouldn't install properly, they didn't have administrative rights to be able to do certain things, and a lot of other just weirdness that we would see from a user perspective that had to do with ActiveX control. So we're basically released completely from that. So let's talk a little bit about, just from an environmental perspective, changes in 2010. Like I said, we're talking 64-bit here, so only 64-bit versions of Windows, right? Same thing with SQL, so you've got to move everything up there. So there are going to be some investments that you have to make to get everything up and running, okay? IE7, so no third-party browser support, right? So IE7 for Project Web Access, that's pretty significant, right? And you must be running SharePoint Server, as I indicated before. So you cannot just take Project Server right out of the box, do an installation, and take the Windows SharePoint services, right? You have to implement SharePoint Server 2010. And like I said, in that getting started, we'll basically go through some of the high-level steps for getting all that set up. Okay. Not to get too technical, we'll basically leave it at this bullet right here, where we're no longer using SSPs. We have a new services application model coming forward, and really what that means in layman's terms is that we're able to manage our services much easier and be able to scale out our system in a much more comprehensive way, right? So that we're not having to rely on the SSP. So it's a pretty significant change from a technical perspective. What it means to you, right, as project managers or administrators, is that your ability to scale out and to really optimize the different services running in the system are enhanced. Okay, a little bit more on the portfolio integration. As I mentioned before, there is no Portfolio Server 2010. all of the portfolio functionality, what they've done is they brought it into Project Server 2010. So Project Server 2010 is an all-encompassing environment, right, that is handling both the portfolio and the project management piece all in one area, right? And so we're very happy and excited about that because we wanted to get a lot of customers up to the portfolio piece of it, but a lot of those users were looking at it and it just didn't seem user-friendly enough and didn't seem like it was doing what it needed to do for them. And I think they'll find that to be different with 2010. No more Outlook add-ins. So those of you who are wanting to have a complete Outlook integration, you're going to get that with 2010. So there's essentially an Exchange server connectivity, right, to Project Server for being able to essentially communicate all those assignments through Microsoft Outlook, right? And like I said, elimination of ActiveX, basically everything's been replaced with this JavaScript grid control. Right. Also, Office Web Components replaced with Excel services. That's another huge piece. So whenever you were doing anything with data analysis in Project Server 2007, that's basically gone away to the wayside. We don't have to make sure that they're running web components, right? For the most part, we're using Excel, and we're using Excel services, and that's going to be part of the SharePoint 2010, part of that whole connectivity. If you're wondering, well, why do we need SharePoint 2010? Well, this is part of it. Excel services, reporting services, all that other functionality coming with it. Okay. Also, proposals and activities. For the most part, all that's removed, right? So we don't have this notion of proposals and activities like we saw in 2007. For the most part, proposals were basically just capturing a description of a project, right? But it was also capturing all the metadata that was associated with it. What they've done is they've removed that, and now we have this new term, new to some people at least, of demand management, right? Where we're able to basically, from Project Server, handle all of the project requests from one centralized location. You'll see that when I get to the demo. Okay, let's talk about Unified Project and Portfolio Management. This is an important screen, and I really enjoyed putting this particular slide together because what I've been telling people is that when you think about Project Server 2007, what it did really well for us was around planning and management, right? But what it didn't do such a great job of from a governance perspective is creation and selection. So if we think about this, from the perspective of what a project is going to go through from beginning to end, here are those phases, right? So with 2010, we're seeing that it's really handling all of these different phases, right? Creation, selection, planning, and management, all the way through closure. Well, from a creation and selection perspective, what we're seeing is top-down portfolio management, right? So this is answering the questions, should we be working on this particular project when it comes in through the queue? And we're forcing that person, that individual who is requesting that project, to make sure that they're filling out certain information about that proposal so that we can weigh it and we can make a good sound judgment about whether or not it should move through to the next phase. And that's all around creation, right? Where do we create these proposals? Where do they live? Where do they reside? How do we manage them, right? How can we create workflow behind them? How can we allow for people to be notified that there's a new request or a new proposal in the system, right? The other part to it is obviously the bottom-up project management. So once it's moved through and it's in the queue, and some group has analyzed it, looked at it, and they perhaps made a selection against it. Now it's time to start managing that, right? So now we have project management from the bottom up within this tool, which we got in 2007, of course, and we have this very strong scheduling engine, right, as working from Microsoft Project. And remember, Project Server came from the client. It wasn't a server-based application that then Project Pro emerged from it. It really went the other way because it has such a powerful scheduling engine. Okay, so bottom-up project management, right? As I talked about from a portfolio perspective, we've got demand management, business case definition, right? All from a portfolio perspective, and then on the project management side, resource management, project scheduling, right? Also, from a project management perspective, now that we've got the schedule within the system, we've got the team collaboration comes along with it. We get issue management, right? And then we've got time reporting. So we've got a project that has been selected. It's in the system now. What do we do with it? How do we How do we work with it? How do team members say, I've completed a task? How do team members go into this particular area and say, I have a problem with this task, I need somebody to help me out with it? How do I notify people of that? How does a project manager then get a report against that to say, I've got X number of issues that I'm having to deal with, and how do I go about closing them, dealing with them, right, assigning them to somebody else or whatever I need to? From a portfolio perspective, right, of course we get the analytics, right, we get the optimization, we get the ability to go in there and say, well, if I've got this amount of a budget, can I do these projects? And based on the 20 projects that are in the system that I'm analyzing, right, that I'm looking at, which of those have the highest priority based on drivers that were pre-established, right, where at some point the organization went in and said, well, this is more important than this. It's more important that we're increasing the market share, right, than we are with keeping our customers happy. Well, of those projects that are increasing the market share, which ones are they, right? Well, how are you dealing with that today? How do you look at that today? How are you even measuring that today? Probably, perhaps not. Many of you probably are, but you don't perhaps have a centralized location by which you're able to do that. Okay. Well, the whole idea is that this is unified, right? Unified between the two different areas. Okay. So let's first take a look. I just want to show you the environment in general. So let me switch a couple things around here. Okay. So let's go into. You're going to see the screen flip here. And I do apologize for this being just a little bit smaller than you should be able to see this okay. It's probably a little smaller on your screens. So this is the new environment. What you're seeing is it looks a lot like 2007, right? We get a SharePoint look and feel. They've moved a couple things around in the quick launch. You see that the projects have been moved up, and that's for those of you who are working with 2007. Right, I basically navigate around by obviously clicking on the different areas. I'm going to go into the projects area. One of the very first things that you're seeing just right out of projects is that in here I've got the new ribbon, right? So while I'm working in Project Web Access in the 2010 environment, you're seeing that I've got some new commands, but this is going to look and feel like the rest of Office, where I've got these tabs at the top. Based on the tab that I happen to choose, right, is going to take me to a different area. You're noticing I can do things like hit new here, right, to kick off a new proposal. I can hit open, right, to open a particular project, perhaps in Microsoft Project Pro, or I can open it in editing just here from within the browser. So a number of different things I can do. It's going to work a lot like what we've seen in our other environments in 2007, even 2003, where a lot of the stuff is separated by views. Right, so I can come over here and I can change the view. In this case, I've got a plan and manage as opposed to create and select. So I've got these views that are basically segmenting my projects based on the phase that they happen to be in. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm just changing the views so I can look at a different set of projects that I'm working with. So I can click on a project very much like I can in 07 to dig in a little bit deeper into the project. What you're noticing here that's slightly different is that you have this upper area here now, right? So in the upper left-hand corner, what you're seeing is that I can then get to different areas of the project. That's very important, right? Because we never got that in 2007. Basically, when the project was built and it was sent up to the server and users were dealing with it, I really couldn't go back in and get things like the project details. I couldn't get more information about that particular project. So what you're seeing now in Project Server 2010 is that information that you want to capture against that project is then going to be stored. It's completely customizable from the perspective of what you're actually gathering against the project. For the most part, in 2007, you were able to create custom project fields. Now you're going to be able to take that one step further and say, yeah, I want to create some custom project fields, but I also want to have some custom workflow based on the selections that were made. Okay, and that's important. That's important to understand that we can actually customize that and start to scale that out. It really takes it to the next level. Okay, and then I'll simply just close out of that. So that's the Project Center. Also coming over here to the Resource Center, there's going to be a lot of similarities here in terms of my ability to select certain users, go into the different views. For example, if I click on a resource here, I have things like resource availability, resource assignments. That's stuff that we had seen obviously before in earlier versions. We have the view area. I can edit resources, obviously, if I have the rights to do that. We get some enhancements from just a presentation perspective when looking at things like resources and their assignments. This is assignment work by resource. I can look at things like remaining availability, right? I can easily change my view option. So the presentation itself is slightly different, but the actual data that's coming over looks and feels a lot like what you were used to before, those of you who had been working with it in previous versions. Notice the export to Excel or the printing, and I can just simply return to the Resource Center from here. Okay, so some of the new areas, which I'll go into as a different user, that we're starting to see here is under My Work. We have Business Intelligence, right? And then we have this whole other area here called Strategy, Driver Libraries, Driver Prioritization, Portfolio Analysis. Okay, this is a big area right here. This little tiny area is very significant to the Project Server 2010 offering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the Project Web Access and just simply get back to the home page here. And let's look at a couple slides on demand management, and then I'll come back in and actually show you a demo there of that. So I'm going to just simply jump back to my PowerPoint here for just a second. Let's see if that plays nice. It might not because of my screens here. So let's do it this way instead. Excuse me. So around demand management, let's talk a little bit about what we're really talking about, right? In essence, we're talking about proposals, right? We want to be able to have a centralized location where we're allowing for users to come into the system and say, okay, I've got a new proposal. I'm going to fill out this proposal, put some information around a project that I would like to have approved. Okay. The real beauty of what we're seeing in 2010 is that you can create multiple proposal types. Okay, so if, for example, through the demo, what I'll show you is around software development. So a requester comes into the system and says, I've got a proposal. It's a software development proposal, so I'm going to go ahead and choose that particular proposal type. When they do that, there are certain elements that are going to then be able to be kicked off and customized. Certain information is then going to be gathered. Certain workflow is then going to be initiated after that. Certain users are going to be communicated to and notified that there's a new proposal out there that's related to software development. Okay, that is a huge significant change than what we're seeing with previous versions of Project Server, right? We just simply didn't get that. We had to handle that demand management somewhere else in the system, either whether it was SharePoint or some other type of application to essentially handle that. Okay. The other thing is it's allowing for the decision-making opportunities, right, from a centralized location. Because we've got workflow built behind it, when a proposal kicks off and it's starting down the workflow, certain users can be notified to say, okay, you've got to approve this. You've got to approve this part of it, right, whether it's a budget, whether it's resources, whether it's even the project type, right? And then it's going to move forward. So once that initial approval comes in, then a user or a group of users with the rights to be able to approve it can then move it down the path, right, and take it forward. So there's certain decision making that's happening as it progresses through, right, the different phases, and we'll see that here in a minute. Okay. Now this notion of demand management can be very simple, it can be very complex, and we'll see a couple of examples of both those that are complex and those that are simple. And this is now starting to. Okay, and so they can be very simple. They can be very complex in terms of the in terms of the way we handle these different proposals, right? So a more complex could have multiple stage approvals in workflow, and the amount of information that's actually being captured could be significantly different. Okay. So some terms that we're going to see that are going to be emerging with this whole notion of demand management. The first one is this whole idea of enterprise project types, right? So when a proposal is first kicked off, we're going to see that there's going to be very specific types. Well, those types are typically going to be in alignment with departments. As I mentioned, software development, an IT department type project, right? As opposed to HR or maybe sales, where you would have a project type that's in alignment. So as we start to work with customers even today and they want to start using some of this demand management, that's the very first thing that we start to talk to them about. Is the first thing is you're going to start segmenting all of these into departments, and not only are you going to have very specific departmental metadata around your projects, but you're also going to have very specific project types that are in alignment with your departments from a demand management perspective. Okay. Then the next term that we're going to see here is around project detailed pages. So if, again, you choose a very specific project type, the information that you're going to be filling out are going to be in these detailed pages that can be completely customized, right? And these pages are what are going to actually be used as you move through the life cycle, right? So you choose software development, you go to a project detailed page, you fill out that information, and it moves it through. Okay, again, completely customizable and made unique to however you want to set these up. And then lastly, workflow, phases, stages, and approvals, right? So you have these governance phases around the way your projects are going to move through. We'll see some examples, and within those are going to be the various stages, okay, as defined by you, right? There are going to obviously be some out of the box that you could run with, but then you can completely change those, right, based on the way in which you're managing your projects, okay? As information is being filled out and it's moving it from phases into stages and different approvals are happening, you're able to track that all the way through, okay? So let's see an example of that. I'm going to come in as a new user out here in my other system. So we'll flip our screens here. Okay. And you should be seeing the Project Web Access view here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as this new user. All right, this user is Amy S. Okay, and I'm going to first come into the Project Center. And as we talked about the simplicity or complexity of the different proposal types, right, and the number in which you create are going to be located here under New. Okay, so when I click on New, what you're going to get out of the box is you're going to get things like sample proposals, right, and basic project plans. Okay, very simple and a little bit more complex. What we'll do is let's take a look at software development, one that's actually been built out here. So I'm going to click on software development. So we basically have initiated a very specific project type, right? And so in this case, I'm just going to type in Windows 7 upgrade, right? Put a short description on here. What's the potential start date? We'll say the 17th. Project department, right? And then who's the owner. So at this point, this is the very initial amount of information that's filling out. Again, this can be as complex or simple. This is a detailed page, right? This is a very specific detailed page with a logo, with form information that can be filled out. So whatever you need to gather here, you can simply gather. So then I'm going to just simply hit save here. And we're processing. So this is the very first stage, the department, the description, the name, the owner. This could fill out more information. You could have clicked a drop down here, for example, that had a very specific software type that would have been completely different had I had selected an HR proposal, right, which may have been more in alignment with the team that was involved or what have you, okay? So it's basically creating this proposal and getting it into the system. And what we'll do is we'll look at an existing project that's already been created and get an idea of what that looks like. Sorry about that, guys. Didn't mean to do that. I'm trying to kill that dialog box. Okay, so what this does is now it brings me back to the main project center, right? And it's in here, right, as a project. Now I'm in the create and the initiate portion of it, and this is where, right, we're going to be able to manage our projects. Now what we can do at this point when we're dealing with these various projects is that we can then change the actual view. So as I mentioned before, right, we have creation, selection, right, planning and management. So I'll go ahead and jump into that area and we'll look at one of these proposals that's a little bit further along here. Okay. So you notice that I'm in planning and management, for example. I click on one of these projects. If I click right on the project itself, it's going to take me into more details about that particular project, right? So here you're noticing that when I'm in the ledger tracking system upgrade, it's actually showing me where it is, right, from a phase stage perspective, right? So here are my phases, right? Initiate, define, plan, and manage, right? Very much in line with what we were talking about with creation, selection, right? Here it's a little bit different. Initiating checkpoints, so here's the approval areas, and this is basically where it is. And it's even showing me down here, right, from a workflow stage perspective, what's been complete and what's still incomplete. Okay? Plan checkpoint, which is basically where we're at, and that is incomplete. Okay? And I can click on that to go into more details of that particular area. If I want to expand this out, I can look at the all workflow stages and it'll show me even more details about where everything is. Okay, so you notice that here you are, right, in this particular area, the plan checkpoint, and that there's an edit button up here at the top for basically editing these values. Okay, and I'll hit close there to get back. So as I'm working through, right, these different projects, the main takeaway that I want you guys to get from this is that you have the complete control over the way you handle new requests. Okay, so the first thing that you're seeing is that you can segment these out departmentally based on the type of proposal that is kicked off here. Different information can be filled out and different workflow elements can then be initiated and then managed that way. It's a huge difference than what we saw when working with 2007. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and jump back, and we have an hour, so I want to make sure I always run out of time here. So I want to make sure that we cover everything. Okay. So we're going to flip it back, and let's talk a little bit about this whole notion of portfolio analysis. Okay. So the first thing is around the selection of projects, right? So we want to be able to see projects that are in the system and be able to do some weighing against them, right? And make some selections against them. Because if we have these different proposals in the system, we're saying, well, here's a new proposal that's coming down the wire, right? It's a software development project. I've got to be able to look at that and say, is this something I should move forward with or not? So I've got to go into my existing set of projects and see where I'm at. Right. See if I can actually add in a new project based on the type of project that it is. Do I have enough money to be able to push it through? Do I have enough resources in order to handle that? Also, from a strategic objective perspective, everything is here. So we've spent our time to really understand organizationally, is this something that we want to move forward with? Based on the information that's being filled out about the proposal, is it in strategic alignment with what we're trying to do as an organization? I need to be able to weigh that. I need to be able to see if it is or not so that I can make a more sound judgment, as opposed to a project manager or another requester, some stakeholder coming through and saying, I think we should do this. I think we should do this project. Seems like a good idea. Everybody else is doing it. We need to be able to scrutinize that particular proposal a little bit more objectively, right? So we can see the project as it's coming through, and more than anything else is that we're scoring it. We're putting some type of number behind it to say, yes, this is a project. It has a certain level of value. It has potential return on investment. Yeah, let's go ahead and move forward with it. We really can objectively look at that. Okay, so it's really helping with the selection of projects, right? Gives us a better, idea of what we should be doing, what we should be working on. Okay, and this is all about communication, right? So when we make these decisions, right, we should be able to make them more efficiently, more effectively, and obviously more people involved with that should be as part of that process. Okay, so let's come in as a different user here, and let's take a look at a little bit on the portfolio analysis piece. So I'm going to log in as a different user, and then I'm going to flip it over so you guys can see what I'm doing. Okay, so now I'm in as this new user. I'll log in as her. Oh. Doesn't like that password. Why not? Worst case scenario, we'll come in as they all have the same password, so it shouldn't make a difference. Anyway, okay, let's take a look. So the very first thing we're going to do, let's look at strategy. Let's look at these drivers, right? So we have this driver library that's already set up. I can create a new driver simply by hitting new here and moving forward with creating that driver. We already have some pre-set up, and let's take a look at these. Expand into new markets and segments. Improve customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, product quality, expense base, right? Let's look at expand into new market and segments. So from within this, right, we're looking at a short description, but then let's take a look at these impact statements, right? So the impact statements around this particular driver, right? Expand into new markets and segments, right? The impact statement, none, because remember, they're going to make this choice, okay? Let's think just for a second what the user is doing. When they're faced with this, they need to be able to say, okay, when I'm looking at this driver and I'm making a decision about whether or not it's expanding into new markets, they're going to have to make a choice and say, well, no, it doesn't grow revenue from any market in the segment. Or, yeah, it grows revenue from about this much. So they're making these choices. These can be anything you guys want at this point. But the impact statements are going to be pretty consistent. None through extreme. Okay? None through extreme. So when the user is making that choice, that's what they're going to be looking at. And you can create as many of these as you need to. Notice I can just simply create new ones in there, right? So in the expand into new markets, this is essentially the configuration of it. Okay? Now let's take a look at the driver prioritization. Okay? In the driver prioritization, I can create new prioritizations, right? Well, here's the CIO prioritization, right? The CIO prioritization is basically what happened is that there was certain interviews, and this is something you guys are going to have to do internally within your organization, is you're going to have to create these prioritizations, right? So by interviewing the CIOs, the conclusions that you've come to have been these: increased market share in existing markets. Priority is 33.67%. Okay, that is the priority for this particular driver based on the CIO, right? On the CIO prioritizations. Okay, does that make sense? So if I hit close here, right, and I go look at the COO prioritization, you can see that they're slightly different, right? Reduce expense base is 40%. Okay, so these are things that you guys are going to configure and store, and this is the type of stuff that we did in Portfolio Server, right? But we're doing it all here. Okay, now let's go take a look. Now that you have a little bit of an idea on the driver side, let's go take a look at portfolio analysis, right? And we have one built here, right? We have one built here. Portfolio analysis, prioritization type, business driver, constraint type, cost and resource. It's an analysis. Let's go take a look at it. Oh, so there's Carol. So now Carol came back. Good. Eventually got Carol back as a user, that is. So here I'm basically just looking at this particular, this portfolio analysis is one that's been saved up. And obviously you guys will need to create these. You're not going to get any of these out of the box, by the way. You're going to have to create these. This is one that's been saved. It has some selected number of projects, fiscal year portfolio analysis, different things that you can set against it. We're not going to go into all the details there. And now let's look at prioritized projects. Okay. So based on this one that I've created, I'm now able to see the projects that I've joined into this fiscal year, and I'm able to see, and to me, when I look at this, I say this is one of the very first things that you guys want to get out of this system straight away. Okay, is you're collecting your projects, right? And you're able to now just simply from the perspective of a segmentation perspective is which projects, which projects have the different, alignment with the drivers that you've created, So acquisition target analysis, expanded new market, strong, Improve customer satisfaction, none. Okay, improve employee, none. This is a very, very powerful area here. Okay, that's going to allow you to go in and make some good decisions about these projects. Okay, now we can review some of the priorities, some different areas. We're not going to go into all of these, but you can then see the prioritization against these. Also analyze costs, analyze resources. Some different areas that you can go into. Again, we're not going to dive into all these different areas. This is something that you guys can do at a later point. Okay, because again, we're running a little bit out of time here. Okay, so let me just, with this user, I'm going to come back to Project Web Access. And let me show you the next section is around enhanced project management. A lot of this that we're going to be working with from a enhanced project management perspective is we have another webinar coming up that we just talked specifically about Project Professional on the desktop, and that's where you can really dig in a little bit deeper there onto that side of it. But basically what I wanted to show you here is if I go into the Project Center, and I'll just find a project that I can, we'll just pick on this guy right here, is that I can do a couple different things with this guy, I can edit this in Project Professional, but I can also edit this guy in Project Web Access. Okay, so a couple things. One, I have an enhanced ability to be able to manage my project. Okay, because I told I wanted to edit it here in Project Web Access, what it's doing is it's going to now allow me to just simply make changes against this project. And look at all the information that's being tracked here. Total cost, total benefit, IRR, risk range, description, justification, for example. I can go into schedule if I needed to. And because I'm essentially editing this guy, what you'll notice is that I've got I'm being exposed to the ribbon that is giving me additional functionality in here, I can insert a task, okay? I can create a dependency with the task, secure project sponsorship. Okay, I can do things like change it to manual or auto selected, Okay, I can create these dependencies in here. Okay, I can change the duration. Okay, I can do some different viewing, filtering, zoom in and out. Okay, I'm obviously able to save. Look at the undo, Undos from within the browser. Okay, and I can save that guy. And I could have brought all of this into Project Professional and definitely have made the changes there, But I'm simply doing it from here, and then obviously I could publish this back up to the server. Okay. So what we're seeing here is that there's an enhanced way of managing your projects from the web, okay, from the web. And then if I go back to project, for example, I can take this guy and notice that I can submit and do different things, go into the project site, build a team from here, and do those types of things. Okay, so let's flip back to our other screen here. So let me just bring out these bullets so we make sure that we cover everything. Web-based editing, right, really we're allowing for more users to really engage the schedule, right? The freeform scheduling, more Excel-like behaviors. You'll see that in the project professional piece, and there's also these team planner functionality and new reporting enhancements that we definitely get from the system. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on, and let's talk about the some of the time and task entry. So I am going to come in as a different user here, so we can talk a little bit about the time and task entry. Then I also want to show you the business intelligence piece. Okay. So as you can see, I'm trying to talk as fast as I can to make sure that we do cover everything, but it's difficult because there are so many things to discuss here. Okay, let's come in as this user. Let's see if it plays nice with this guy. Should be the same password. Much better. Okay, so this particular section is on time and task entry. Okay, the very first thing you get when we come into the tasks area is this idea that, you know, time entry has been a bit of an issue when working in Project Server 2007, and there's a lot of third-party timesheet applications to sit on top of Project Server because they really didn't do a very good job of it. They definitely have made some improvements to that. They've addressed some different issues around it. You see things like planned, for example, the ability to bring up planned work from here. I can scroll across and look at these different areas. I can select a period. This is very nice that I can come in here and I can look at a particular period, and I know that in this case the period that this user was working with is really in 2009 where he does actually have some work assigned to him. And so what you're seeing here with the planned and actual is there's the actual row there, and so I can just basically turn this off and on. Okay, and I can move through the periods. I can click on a particular task, for example. It takes me into more details, very much like it did in 2007. I've got my recalculated options. If I want to get more details, if I scroll down, you'll notice that there's an attachments area, contact information, right, related assignments, right, just more detail about the task and really easier to navigate around. Notice that there's a back button, which is also always very confusing when we were working in 07 where the user felt that they were having to click too many times in order to get to a particular area. Here the navigation and the experience has definitely been enhanced from just a time tracking perspective. Okay, and for the most part in terms of clicking, notice I have the ability to send my status for selected tasks or all tasks. So that portion of it has really been really have got some changes to that. Notice that I've got some different views here, some different filters, right? Newly assigned tasks, completed tasks, all incomplete tasks. Okay, so definitely some enhancements there. Around the timesheets area is I'm going to manage my timesheets very much like I did in 2007 if you're using timesheets, if you're tracking project and non-project time. You can see that I've got some different timesheets, a lot that still need to be created. I've got this guy down here for 314, for example. I can go into that timesheet. That one's in progress. And you see I still obviously have all the same type of buttons that I've worked with before here, right? Planned and comment on. I can bring in, right, actual with planned, just like I did before. This is where I'm going to send the timesheet data, and I'm going to send the status information. So instead of it forcing me to have to jump back and forth like I did in 2007 when I was bringing in over my data, I basically can set this up so that I have a single entry area by which I'm tracking all of my time. And so that's a big plus, right? And that's a big enhancement with working with 2010, is that the experience from a team member perspective is definitely enhanced. So this is an easier sell now. Whenever we deployed 2007 and there was a timesheet and task sheet component to it, we always saw it as a way that we were going to have to go in there and convince the team members that it was actually not going to be that difficult or take that much time. It's going to be much easier to be able to present that today. Okay. Okay, and if there's any questions on that, by all means, let me know on any of the stuff that we've covered so far. So a little bit on the time and task entry. Like I said, there's a single entry mode, definitely an enhancement from a user experience perspective. 2 sets of books around non-project time and project time, right? And the actual data entry is definitely enhanced here, where we've got this, timesheet looking grid, right, where we have planned and actual, and it's going to be very straightforward for the user to basically go in there and spend a few minutes entering in their time. Okay, and also this single entry mode, and just obviously the benefits of being able to do that. So now they don't have to jump back and forth. They go into one area. It's very easy to configure from an administrator perspective, and they just simply enter in their time and they send it forward, right? They're not doing a lot of clicking around. They're not jumping around, opening up pop-up windows and things like that. It's all one area, okay? And the integration, obviously, with Outlook is going to be very, very straightforward, too. So being able to get them to simply, having the time exposed to them by, baking it right into Outlook is definitely going to be a big plus for you as well, okay? So let me show you the BI piece, because I don't have it here in the presentation, but I think it's important enough to take a look at, and I definitely think you'll appreciate this part of it. So let me come back into Project Web Access here real quick, and hopefully it'll take Carol. If not, we'll come in as the administrator. Let's see if Carol plays nice. Yeah, that time she does. Okay. And where I'm going to go from here is Carol not a... Carol, oh, let's see, there it is again, still looking at her team. Come on. There's Carol. And there's Business Intelligence. Okay, so we go to Business Intelligence. First thing we'll do is let's just take a look at a couple things that we've got here. Okay, here's all our different dashboards. I'm going to jump right into the corporate dashboard. What this is doing is that we're looking at the new business intelligence area of Project Server. This is using the, it'd help if I was showing you what I was looking at. This is taking advantage of, obviously, Project Server, Performance Point, right? SQL reporting services, all within one centralized area, right? This is always what users wanted. This is what they were always clamoring for in previous versions. Can I get this? How do we get this type of visibility? How do we get these KPIs, right? How do we get these different reports, right? How do we get these dashboards? Here they are. A lot of stuff right out of the box. A lot of stuff obviously you're going to have to build. So this is giving us a view, right? Projects by department, number of projects by phase, right? 30 in manage, 9 in plan, right? Come down here, another quick little chart, cumulative work planned versus actual versus forecasted, right, across. Look at that, powerful stuff, okay? Well, it looks like we have a problem here with IT, so let's click on it. It's going to give us a pop-up window, and it's going to drill us into the IT department, and we can then start to see what's the issue with projects that have been segmented into this department. Beautiful, right? And so we can come down here and we've got some issues with cost, resource, and schedule. And then if we come down even further, we've got our KPI status report against each of the projects that are in the IT department. Look at that. Storage, planning, and management. Okay. Now, these reports that we're looking at, okay, these various reports that were these dashboards, very easy to work with, very easy to customize as well. Okay, if I go into the templates area, for example, IT projects by phase, right? Remember the one that we were just looking at there? Well, look at this. I can just simply click on it, and I can actually edit that in Excel. Okay, so what this is basically telling us is as you're looking at this, you're saying, well, these look pretty difficult to create. These look pretty difficult to even manage. Not at all. Because if you're an Excel user, and if you're a Power Excel user, and you've been working in this environment for quite some time, your ability to create and manage these types of reports are going to be very straightforward. Obviously, the structure is going to need to be set up, and the different pages and layouts are going to need to be created. But once they're up there, basically being able to manage them is going to be very straightforward. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, guys, with that quick talking and quick moving around and all that stuff, we still made it just in time at the final hour. Okay. By all means, drop your questions in there. Let's see if there's any question. I don't see anything in there. Some next steps for you guys. We have quite a few webinars coming up on 2010. We're going to dig deeper into each of these areas. So we're going to move away from the what's new, and then we're going to start jumping into each of these areas that we talked about, whether it's the portfolio analytics, the demand management, right, the business intelligence. Each of these, where we're going to have basically an entire webinar on just BI, entire webinar on just demand management. So in a lot of ways, some of the stuff that we would do in a normal 8 or 16 or 24-hour training, session, we're basically going to be giving away little 1-hour snippets here and there. So I encourage you guys to come back and take a look at some of those coming up. We also do a 1 free hour consultation. If you guys are getting ready for this and you're putting up a proof of concept, drop us a line. We're working with a couple prospects right now on that, and then contact me directly if you guys have any specific questions. We'd be happy to help you guys out and and get you going in this new environment. Okay, and with that, everybody have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to stay on the line if there's any more questions that pop up, but otherwise we'll see you guys in the next session. I appreciate you coming out.